My wife cheated with my best friend, then secretly forged my signature to sell our family house for $750, $0. Now she's claiming I have no rights and trying to take everything in a brutal court battle over the money. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. The moment I found out about my wife, Jessica, cheating on me with my best friend, Mark, everything changed. It was one of those moments that hits you so hard you swear your head's going to explode. I had no idea that I was walking around blind, thinking everything was fine, while behind my back they were planning their little secret life together. The craziest part, it all unraveled because of a simple, almost insignificant mistake on my part, and that mistake turned into a bombshell I never saw coming. It started about 2 months ago. Jessica had been acting a little off, more irritable, distracted, and suddenly she was disappearing for hours without telling me where she was going. At first, I thought she was just stressed at work, or maybe she was having some kind of midlife crisis. We had been married for about 5 years, and honestly, things weren't perfect, but I believed we were solid. She was always a little bitchy when she was stressed, some snarky comment here, a dismissive tone there. Nothing unusual, or so I told myself. But then she started getting more secretive, hiding her phone, deleting texts, and always being busy whenever I tried to talk to her about how she was feeling. One night, I decided to follow her after she said she was going out for girls' night. She told me she was meeting some friends for drinks, but I had this gut feeling she wasn't being honest. I waited until she left, then snuck out after her, keeping my distance. I followed her to a fancy downtown hotel. I saw her go into a room with Mark. Yeah, Mark, the guy I trusted more than anyone. They were in there for hours. I couldn't believe it. I stood outside, watching through the window as they kissed, laughed, and clearly did more than just talk. It was a sickening sight. My wife, my supposed partner, cheating on me with my best friend. How did it come to this? I didn't confront her then. Instead, I went home, my mind racing. I felt a strange numbness, like I'd been punched in the gut, but also like I was frozen in place. I replayed everything, trying to find some sign, some clue I missed. But I knew what I saw, and I knew I couldn't unsee it. The next day, I started digging. I went through her phone, her emails, her social media accounts. It didn't take long to find more. Texts, pictures, secret messages, proof of everything. The worst part was the way she lied about it. When I confronted her, she told me I was overreacting, that it was nothing, just a fling, that I was paranoid and jealous. She spun this whole web of lies, trying to make me doubt myself. But I had enough evidence to know the truth. Jessica had been cheating on me with Mark for months, maybe longer. The betrayal cut so deep I could hardly breathe. It wasn't just the cheating, though, that hurt like hell. It was the fact that she lied to my face, made me doubt my own instincts, and then had the audacity to deny everything even when I had proof. I felt angry, yes, but mostly devastated. I had built a life with her, trusted her with everything. And now I realized she'd been planning her escape while I was clueless. The hardest part was knowing that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been lying to me every day. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. In those first few days, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I was furious at Mark for betraying me, for breaking the bond of friendship and decency. I was furious at Jessica for throwing away everything we built and for treating me like I was nothing. But I also felt incredible sadness, like I'd lost a part of myself and my future. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I kept replaying the moments when I'd been blind to what was happening. How could someone I loved so much do this to me? How could she lie so effortlessly? The trust I had in her was shattered, and I didn't know how to start putting myself back together. That's when the legal stuff started creeping in. Jessica began acting even more bitchy, dismissing my concerns, accusing me of being paranoid, saying I was jealous and insecure. She accused me of being controlling, even though I was just trying to find out the truth. The more I pushed, the more she spun her lies. And then she started talking about money, about selling the house, about splitting everything, about how I had no rights because I was crazy and possessive. That was the first real shock. She'd secretly forged my signature on documents to sell our family home for $750, $0. I never even knew she was doing that until I found the papers. She had been planning her escape for months, and I was just a pawn in her game. I realized I was in a war I didn't understand. My world was falling apart, and she was trying to take everything from me. Our house, our savings, everything we had built. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. All I knew was that I couldn't let her walk away with my life, my money, and my dignity. That's where I am now, trying to figure out how to fight back, how to protect what's mine, and how to move on. From the nightmare Jessica turned my life into. I never thought I'd be here, but here I am, telling this story because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it. After I uncovered the forged signatures, everything changed. The house was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where we built our life together, and now she was trying to sell it behind my back. The shock of it hit me like a freight train, but I knew I had to act fast. I started digging into the legal documents she had forged, and damn, the more I looked, the more I realized how deep her lies went. She had managed to get a notary to sign off on the sale, claiming I was incapacitated or out of town, which was a blatant lie. I was home that day, working in my office. I just never checked the mail or the paperwork because I trusted her. That was my mistake. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed someone who knew the ins and outs of property law and how to deal with someone who was clearly trying to screw me over. The lawyer, a guy named David, listened carefully, asked all the right questions, and then told me I had a solid case to contest the sale. But even hearing that didn't prepare me for the emotional toll. I was furious. Not just angry at Jessica, but furious at myself for being so blind. I kept replaying moments when she'd been cold, dismissive, and distant, wondering how I missed the signs. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to find out everything I believed in was a lie. Jessica, of course, everything. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, and that I was just jealous of Mark. She said she loved me, that she was just having fun, and that I should trust her. She spun these elaborate stories, trying to make me doubt what I saw with my own eyes. Her voice was icy, her eyes cold. She kept insisting I was imagining things, that I was insecure, that she never cheated on me, and that the house was our home and I had no right to interfere. That was a lie. I had the proof right in front of me, but she was good at twisting things, good at making me feel like I was the crazy one. I remember sitting there, listening to her, feeling this mixture of rage and despair. How could she do this? How could she lie so blatantly and then turn around and accuse me of being the problem? It was like she had no shame, no remorse. She was trying to gaslight me, trying to make me believe I was the one causing the trouble. But I knew better. I had seen the texts, the pictures, the forged signatures. This wasn't just a fling or some innocent affair. It was a full-blown betrayal, and she was trying to wipe her hands clean of it. The emotional impact was brutal. I felt like I was losing my mind at first, confused, angry, hurt. I couldn't understand how someone I loved and trusted could do this to me. I kept asking myself if I was somehow to blame, if maybe I wasn't enough, if I missed the signs. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I was a good husband. I worked hard, paid the bills, tried to be supportive, and she had been sneaking around, lying, forging my signature, planning to walk away with everything we had. The house, the money, our future. That's when I realized the depth of her betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about the complete disregard she had for everything we built together. I started to think about the money, how she had managed to get her hands on it. The $750, $0 from selling the house was supposed to be our nest egg, our security for retirement, our kids' education. Instead, she was trying to take it all. She claimed I had no rights because I was crazy, but I knew I had legal grounds. The forged signatures were proof enough. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight, not just for the house, but for my dignity and what was rightfully mine. That's when my plan started forming. I needed to expose her, stop her from selling the house, and reclaim what she was trying to steal. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could: proof of her affair, the forged documents, the bank statements showing she'd transferred money without my knowledge. I also started thinking about how to counter her legal moves. She was claiming I had no rights, that I was mentally unstable, and that I was trying to ruin her. That was her tactic, divide and conquer. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I knew I had to be smart, patient, and prepared. The emotional was relentless. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I also felt a strange sense of clarity, like I finally understood what kind of person she really was. And I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to do something, and I had to do it quickly before she managed to get away with everything. I remember sitting in my office late at night, staring at the legal papers, trying to figure out my next move. The house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was our life, our history. And now it was in jeopardy because of her greed and lies. I knew I had to act fast, but I also felt exhausted, emotionally drained from the betrayal and the fight ahead. But I was determined. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she wanted, not without a fight, because at the end of the day, the truth had to come out, and I had to stand up for what was right. The legal battle was a nightmare from the start. Jessica, of course, played the victim card every chance she got. She told everyone, her friends, her family, even some of my relatives, that I was unstable, that I was trying to ruin her, that I was paranoid and jealous. She painted herself as the innocent wife betrayed by her untrustworthy husband. Meanwhile, she was out there forging documents, lying to the courts, and secretly selling off our assets. It was surreal. I had never felt so betrayed in my life, and now I was fighting a woman who seemed to have no boundaries, no conscience. The day I filed the legal injunction to stop the sale of the house was one of the most stressful days I've ever experienced. I remember sitting across from David, my lawyer, as he explained the process. I had to provide all my evidence, the forged signatures, the texts, the emails, the bank transfers. It was a lot to gather, but I knew I had to be thorough. Jessica's response was immediate and vicious. She claimed I was trying to manipulate the court, that I was mentally unstable, and that I had no right to interfere because I was acting out of anger. She even went as far as to accuse me of abusing her emotionally, another lie. She spun her web so convincingly that at times I wondered if I was going crazy myself. Jessica's bitchy attitude only worsened. She kept dismissing my concerns, calling me paranoid, possessive, and unstable, all while trying to paint herself as the victim. She told everyone that I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of Mark, and that I was crazy for believing she had an affair. The court, unfortunately, has a way of being slow, especially when it comes to family law and property disputes. Meanwhile, Jessica was actively trying to sell the house behind my back, forging my signature on legal documents, and even transferring some of our savings into secret accounts. Every day, I felt like I was fighting a losing battle, like my life was spiraling out of control. I was furious at her for doing this to me, but I also felt helpless. How do you fight someone who's willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate her way through the legal system? I knew I had to be strategic. I hired a private investigator, someone Jessica didn't know I'd brought in. He started digging into her financials, her whereabouts, and her contacts. I needed to know if she was planning to disappear with the money or try to hide assets. What I found was worse than I expected. She had already transferred a significant chunk of the sale proceeds into offshore accounts, and she was making plans to leave the country if she could. The court hearings were brutal. Jessica sat there, acting innocent, trying to sway the judge with tears and false accusations. She claimed I was abusive, that I was trying to control her, that I was mentally unstable, all tactics to distract from her lies. But I had enough evidence to counter her claims. I presented the forged documents, the bank statements, the private investigators' reports. I even had witnesses who could testify about her secret meetings with Mark and her attempts to sell the house illegally. It was a long, exhausting process, and every day I felt the emotional toll mounting. I was angry, betrayed, and helpless all at once. In the meantime, Jessica kept up her act of being the victim. She accused me of trying to ruin her reputation, of being jealous and controlling. She told everyone that I was unstable, that I was violent, and that I was trying to keep her from her happiness. But the truth was clear to everyone who was paying attention. She was the one manipulating the system, forging signatures and planning her escape with the money. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to keep fighting, no matter how exhausted I was. One of the most shocking moments came when Jessica, in court, claimed she had full rights over the house because I was mentally unfit and that I had no claim to the property. That was when I realized how far she was willing to go. She had forged my signature on legal documents, and now she was trying to gaslight everyone into believing I was the problem. I stood there, furious but composed, and presented the evidence. The judge looked over everything carefully, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the outcome, but I had the proof. Throughout this chaos, I also started to realize how much money Jessica was after. She wasn't just after the house. She wanted the entire fortune. She kept claiming I had no rights, that I was delusional, and that I was trying to ruin her life. But I knew she was the one who had been secretly planning this for months. The forged signatures, the transfers, the secret meetings with her lawyer, everything pointed to her carefully orchestrated plan to take everything I had. I was furious, but I also knew I had to stay calm, stay focused, and keep fighting for what was rightfully mine. I felt like I was in a war I couldn't see the end of. Every day brought new surprises, more lies from Jessica, more evidence of her betrayal, more attempts to manipulate the system. But I also learned a lot about how people can lie and cheat when they think they can get away with it. Jessica had no shame, no conscience. She was willing to destroy everything we built just to get her hands on the money. And her plan was almost foolproof, except for one thing. I refused to let her win. I was going to fight her every step of the way, no matter how exhausting it became. Because deep down, I knew the truth, and I knew I had to stand up for myself, before she took everything I loved and everything I earned. The court battles dragged on for what felt like an eternity. Jessica, true to form, played the victim to perfection. She showed up in court with a smug smile, acting helpless, claiming I was trying to turn her life into a nightmare just because I was paranoid and jealous. She insisted she loved me, that her affair with Mark was just a mistake, a moment of weakness, and that I was overreacting. She even had the nerve to say I was controlling her, that I was abusive, stuff that made my blood boil. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she was orchestrating her escape plan, secretly transferring money, forging signatures, and trying to make it all seem like I was the one losing my mind. One day, I got a huge break. My lawyer, David, managed to get a court order halting the sale of the house. Jessica's face when she saw the restraining order was priceless. She was furious, screaming at her lawyer, trying to argue her way out of it. But the evidence was stacking up too high against her. I had proof of the forged signatures, the bank transfers, the private investigators' reports, and her own lies. The judge looked at everything and finally agreed to freeze the sale until the case was resolved. That bought me some time, but I knew she wouldn't give up easily. Jessica's response was classic: more lies, more manipulation. She claimed I was trying to ruin her life because I was mentally unstable, that I was jealous of Mark, and that I was trying to keep her from her happiness. She spun stories about how I had emotionally abused her, even though I never laid a hand on her. It was her way of trying to turn the court against me, to make me look like the bad guy. But I had witnesses, messages, and legal proof that painted a different picture. I could see through her act, and I knew the judge was starting to see it too. Meanwhile, her efforts to hide assets intensified. She opened new accounts offshore, transferred more money, and even tried to get rid of evidence. I hired a forensic accountant to track her financial activities. What we uncovered was staggering. She had transferred nearly $200, $0 of the house sale proceeds, into accounts in the islands. She was planning to disappear with everything. I felt so betrayed I could barely breathe. How could she be so cold, so calculated? She was willing to destroy our marriage, lie, cheat, forge my signature, and now she was trying to run away with the money. It was like watching someone turn into a monster right before my eyes. The emotional toll was brutal. There were nights I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. How we had once been happy, how she used to smile at me, and now she was trying to take everything I had. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with so much. But the truth was, I was blind for too long. I trusted her blindly, and that trust was shredded into pieces. The pain of betrayal was like a constant ache, a deep wound that refused to heal. Yet, I knew I had to keep fighting for myself, for what was rightfully mine. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that I was unfit, that I was mentally unstable, and that I shouldn't have any rights to the house. She claimed I was trying to manipulate the court, that I was obsessed. Honestly, I was stunned at how far she was willing to go. I had the evidence, her forged signatures, the bank transfers, the private investigators' reports, and I presented it all. I saw the judge's expression change as he realized the extent of her deception. Jessica's face was a mask of false innocence, but I could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes. The worst moment came when Jessica, in court, claimed she had full rights to the house because I was mentally unfit to make decisions. That was the tipping point for me. I knew she was trying to manipulate the system, to make herself look like the victim and me the villain. But I had the proof of her forgery, her lies, and her financial schemes. I looked at her and realized how much she was willing to lie and cheat just to get what she wanted. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let her win, no matter how much she tried to gaslight everyone, including the judge. I also started to understand how deeply she wanted the money. The house was just the beginning. She had her eyes on the fortune she thought she could walk away with, more than enough to start a new life somewhere far away. I was angry, yes, but I was also determined. I had to stop her. I had to protect what was mine. I hired more experts, planned my next moves carefully, and prepared myself for the long haul. Because I knew this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about justice, about making her face the consequences of her lies and betrayal. Every day felt like a battle, but I was learning how to fight smarter. Jessica's manipulations wouldn't work on me anymore. I was determined to see this through, no matter how brutal it got. The betrayal had cut so deep, but I refused to let her take everything I cared about. I was going to expose her, fight for my rights, and rebuild my life. I knew I had a long road ahead, but I also knew I couldn't give up. Not now, not after everything she'd done. The courtroom saga kept dragging on, and with each hearing I felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. Jessica's lawyers tried every trick in the book, shifting blame, claiming I was mentally unstable, and making it seem like I was the one trying to manipulate the system. Meanwhile, I had to constantly stay one step ahead, gathering new evidence, coordinating with forensic accountants, and preparing for more false accusations from her side. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. One of the most infuriating moments was when Jessica told the court she was the victim, and that I was trying to control her life. She cried fake tears, clutching her handbag, spinning her web of lies. She claimed I had been abusive and that I was incapable of making rational decisions. Her words made my blood boil. I had never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice, yet she was trying to paint me as some kind of monster. The only thing I had done was love her and trust her. Now, I was staring at the woman who had betrayed me with my best friend, forged my signature, and plotted to steal everything I owned. Jessica's attempts to hide her assets were relentless. She transferred more money into offshore accounts, opened new ones under fake names, and even tried to use legal loopholes to get around the court orders. I hired a forensic financial expert who uncovered her latest scheme. She was planning to move the money to a country with no extradition treaties. That was the moment I realized how far she was willing to go. She wasn't just after the house. She was trying to disappear with the entire fortune, leaving me with nothing. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I'd wake up in cold sweats, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. Every night I'd lie awake replaying everything: the secret meetings, the lies, the forged signatures, the stolen money. I felt like I was losing grip on reality. How could someone I loved so deeply do this to me? How could she be so ruthless, so selfish? The pain became a dull ache that never quite went away, but I knew I had to keep going. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, for my dignity, and for the truth. Jessica's lawyer, always trying to sway the court, argued that I was unstable and that I had no right to challenge her. She claimed I was trying to ruin her reputation out of jealousy. For a moment, I thought I'd lose my temper, but I kept my composure. I presented the court with all the evidence, proof of her forgery, the bank transfers, the private investigators' reports, and witness testimonies. I watched her face shift from confident to desperate as the judge listened carefully. Her lies were unraveling fast. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the court, but she was fighting a losing battle. One day, she made a bold move. She filed a counterclaim insisting she had full rights to the house because I was mentally unfit to make decisions. That was her last-ditch effort to turn the tide. I knew she was grasping at straws, trying to make herself look innocent and me look like the crazy one. But I had the evidence and I had the truth. I knew her game. I looked right into her eyes and saw the desperation. It was a sickening realization, how she was willing to destroy everything, including her own integrity, just to get the money and run. The most shocking thing was realizing how much she was after the money. The house was just a piece of the puzzle. She wanted the entire fortune, more than enough to start fresh somewhere far away. And I was the obstacle she needed to eliminate. Her lies, her manipulations, her forged signatures, they all pointed to one thing. She was willing to do anything to get her hands on that money. That realization fueled my determination. I couldn't let her succeed. I had to expose her, stop her from disappearing with our savings, and reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every day was a new challenge. Jessica kept up her act of innocence, but I knew better. I had the proof, and I was ready to fight for it. I hired more experts, coordinated with law enforcement, and prepared for the worst. I knew she was planning to vanish, but I refused to let her. I'd come too far to back down now. My heart was broken, yes, but I also felt a fierce resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and my future. I knew I'd need every ounce of strength I had to get through what was coming next. But I was determined. I wasn't going to let her win. Not after everything she'd done. The final stretch of this nightmare came with a flood of court decisions, revelations, and a sense that I was finally closing in on justice. Jessica's lies had been exposed more thoroughly than I could have imagined. Her attempt to claim full rights to the house based on her fabricated emotional distress crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The forged signatures, the offshore transfers, the private investigators' reports, all of it painted a clear picture. She was trying to steal everything from me. The judge, after reviewing everything, issued an order voiding the sale of the house, freezing her assets, and appointing a court-appointed trustee to oversee the distribution of the estate. Jessica's face during the final hearing was a mixture of anger and despair. She knew she lost. Her carefully constructed lies had fallen apart and the truth was undeniable. She tried to spin a last-minute sob story about how she still loved me, how she made mistakes, but nobody was buying it anymore. The court saw through her manipulations, her false tears, and her blatant dishonesty. The judge made it clear that her actions, faking signatures, transferring money, attempting to hide assets, were criminal. The verdict was swift. She would be held accountable, and I would get my rightful share, including the house. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, but the most important thing was that I regained control over what was left. The house was preserved, and the money she had tried to steal was recovered and redistributed according to the court's ruling. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt broken, exhausted, and defeated. But I also felt a strange sense of relief, finally, some justice. I could start to rebuild my life, free from her deception. I had learned a brutal lesson about trust, greed, and the lengths some people will go for money and betrayal. Jessica was ordered to pay fines, reimbursements, and face potential criminal charges for her forgery and financial crimes. She was furious, of course, and her bitterness seeped into every interaction. But I had no interest in revenge anymore. I just wanted to move forward and leave the nightmare behind. I realized that sometimes the only way to survive betrayal, especially on such a massive scale is to stand tall, gather evidence, and fight tooth and nail for what's right. I learned that trust is fragile, and some people will destroy everything to get what they want. Looking back, I see how much this experience has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of red flags, and more skeptical of appearances. But I also feel stronger. I learned that even in the darkest moments, the truth can shine through if you're willing to fight for it. Jessica's actions taught me about the destructive power of greed and lies, but also about resilience. I've come out of this battered but not broken. I now understand that justice isn't always quick or easy, but it's worth fighting for. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore red flags. Document everything. When someone betrays you on this level, cheating, forging, stealing, be prepared to fight hard and smart. You're stronger than you think, and the truth will come out if you stay persistent. In the end, I've learned that justice isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your future. And no matter how brutal the betrayal, there's always a way to come out the other side. Maybe, but ultimately victorious.